Welcome to Zarila HOA Stories. Drop your country or city name in the comments. I love knowing where my viewers are watching from. All right, listen carefully, because what happened to me could happen to anyone living under a controlling HOA. My name is Ethan Cole, and I live in a quiet little neighborhood called Maple Ridge, a place that looked perfect on the outside. Clean lawns, white fences, smiling neighbors. But behind those smiles lived the most power-hungry HOA board you could imagine. And at the top of that board, a woman named Karen Bishop, the HOA president. Sharp tongue, fake smile, and a clipboard that could end your peace in seconds. For years, I stayed out of trouble, paid my dues, mowed my lawn, followed their endless list of community guidelines. But one morning, everything changed. It was a Monday, quiet, sunny, just like any other. I walked into my kitchen to make coffee. Turned on the faucet, nothing came out. I twisted it harder, checked the sink, then the bathroom. Not a single drop. No water. No pressure. Nothing. I ran outside, thinking maybe a pipe had burst, but the street looked fine. Neighbors were watering their lawns. Kids were filling water balloons. Everyone else had running water, except me. And that's when I saw her. Karen, standing near the HOA community gate, talking to two other board members, smirking as she pointed toward my house. I walked up to her and asked, "Hey, do you know if there's a water line issue?" She tilted her sunglasses down, smiled that smug little smile, and said, "Maybe next time you'll remember to pay your beautification fee on time, Mr. Cole." I froze. "You're saying you cut off my water? You can't do that." Karen folded her arms, pretending to care. Technically, the HOA controls the neighborhood utilities. Maybe once your account's clear, your water will magically return. She walked away, laughing. I stood there, stunned. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. I had paid my dues, except one ridiculous $50 fine they added for grass inconsistency. I refused to pay it because it was nonsense, and now they were punishing me. For the next few hours, I called the city water department, but they said my property was under private HOA distribution. So, legally, they couldn't intervene. That's when the realization hit me like a thunderbolt. I was on my own. That night, sitting in my backyard, staring at the dry garden hose, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't going to beg them for water. I wasn't going to pay a cent to those bullies. Instead, I was going to find another way. As I sat there under the porch light, I remembered something my grandfather, who originally bought this land decades ago, once told me before he passed. "Ethan, this land has more under it than people realize. Always remember that." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. But that night, those words hit different. I went inside, opened the old wooden chest he left behind, filled with yellowed papers and maps. Among the dusty documents, I found something that made my heart stop for a moment. A faded blueprint of the property. In small handwriting near the back corner of the lot, a note read, "Old well line. Still functional. Do not seal." My pulse raced. Could it be possible? Could there still be an old well under my backyard, untouched for decades? I looked out the window into the darkness, where the moonlight barely touched the ground near the old shed. If the note was real, that's where it would be buried. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. The HOA thought they could control me by cutting off my water. But what they didn't know was that I was about to dig up something that would turn their entire world upside down. They took my water, but I was about to drown them in their own rules. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's smug grin and heard that dripping silence from my faucet, mocking me. By 3 a.m., I was at my dining table surrounded by my grandfather's old maps, survey papers, and handwritten notes. The faded ink smelled like dust and oil, but every word pulled me deeper into a forgotten history of my land. One page in particular stood out, a rough sketch of Maple Ridge, long before the HOA even existed. Back then, it wasn't a community, it was farmland. The map showed irrigation routes, creeks, and a handwritten mark on my exact lot. Private well, installed 1974. I whispered to myself, "Grandpa, where'd you hide down there?" The next morning, the HOA doubled down. I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my mailbox. It said, Unapproved maintenance activity. Fines will increase daily. Maintenance activity? I hadn't even done anything yet. It was like they knew I was planning something. I tore the notice down, crumpled it, and threw it into the trash. That was the moment I stopped being afraid. I drove to the local records office and asked to see property deeds for my address. The clerk, an older man named Ray, scanned my ID and raised an eyebrow. "You're on the old coal lot." I nodded. "Funny thing," he said, pulling out a dusty folder. This property's water rights were filed separate from the main system back in the 70s. Most people don't have that. Separate water rights. That meant legally the HOA had no control over my underground water. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This was it, my loophole, my weapon. That afternoon, I returned home, rolled up my sleeves, and walked toward the old shed. The ground back there was uneven and overgrown with weeds. I grabbed a shovel, took a deep breath, and started to dig. Every strike of the shovel felt like payback. Sweat ran down my arms. Dirt flew in all directions. My neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering. After an hour, the shovel hit something hard, clang. I dropped to my knees, brushed away the dirt, and saw a metal cap covered in rust. The faded letters were barely visible. CULE, well CO, 1974. It was real. The old well was still there. My heart jumped with excitement. I ran inside, grabbed my phone, and called my friend Lucas, a licensed plumber who'd grown up with me. When I told him what I'd found, he laughed. "You're telling me you've got your own water supply under HOA land? That's wild. I'll bring my tools." Within an hour, Lucas pulled up in his old pickup truck, toolbox rattling in the back. We worked under the glow of a single floodlight, digging deeper, clearing the edges, and prying the cap loose. When we finally lifted it, a puff of cool air rose from below. Lucas lowered a flashlight into the shaft. "Ethan, this thing's deep, and it's clean. Look at that shine on the wall. Water's down there, for sure." He tested the pump connection, replaced the valve, and attached a temporary line. The moment we fired up the motor, a low rumble echoed through the ground. And then, with a sudden burst, water shot into the air like a geyser of victory. I couldn't believe it. After days of silence, that sound, rushing, gurgling, pure, was the sweetest thing I'd ever heard. Lucas laughed, wiping his hands. "Well, my friend, looks like you've got yourself an unlimited supply. Legally yours, too." I filled my hands, took a sip, and smiled. "Tastes like freedom." For a few minutes, we just stood there listening to the steady hum of the pump, the splash of water landing in the dirt. It was like the earth itself was clapping back at the HOA. But then I noticed something, the way the light from my porch glimmered across the puddles, catching in the cracks of the dry soil that ran toward the main street. That's when the next idea hit me. If this well was strong enough to supply my house, it could probably feed more. And if the HOA wanted to play games with utilities, maybe I could turn their own rules into profit. Before I went inside, I covered the well with a wooden lid and locked the shed. Nobody needed to know yet, not even the neighbors. For now, it would stay our secret. But one thing was certain. Karen Bishop thought she had silenced me by cutting off my water. She had no clue that I now owned the one resource she couldn't control. As I turned off the porch light that night, the sound of flowing water echoed faintly beneath my feet. It felt alive, like my grandfather's voice whispering through the ground. "Told you, son, this land has more under it than they realize." I smiled into the darkness and muttered, "Thanks, Grandpa. Time to make them pay for every drop." The war with the HOA had just begun. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My clothes were still caked with mud from last night's digging, but I didn't care. I felt alive. For the first time since the HOA cut my water, I had power again. I brewed my coffee using water from the well. It tasted better than any bottle brand in the store, not just because it was clean, but because it was mine. As I sat on the porch sipping, I watched the sprinklers in the other lawns quietly misting the air. Every drop they used came from the HOA's control. Every drop I used came from freedom. But I wasn't satisfied. Getting my water back wasn't enough. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for every neighbor who'd ever been bullied by Karen Bishop and her power-hungry board. So I made a plan, a quiet one. The first step, make the well invisible. I didn't want anyone finding out about it yet, especially the HOA spies who drove around in their golf carts pretending to inspect homes. I disguised the area behind my shed by laying wooden planks and old boxes over the spot. Then I set up a small workbench on top, so it just looked like a cluttered storage corner. Next, I went online and ordered a small filtration and pump system, the kind used for rural houses. It arrived 2 days later. Lucas came by again, helping me install everything: proper pipes, clean tanks, even a pressure gauge that connected straight into my house. We worked through the night, quietly. By morning, my entire plumbing system ran through the well. No HOA valve, no dependency, nothing they could touch. When I turned on my kitchen tap and water poured out strong and steady, I felt something shift inside me, like I had taken back my freedom drop by drop. Lucas leaned against the counter, grinning. "Man, you've got better pressure than the city lines. You could supply half this block." That line stuck in my head. Half this block. What if I actually could? I started doing some math, looking at the output per hour, the gallons the pump could handle, the depth of the well. It wasn't just functional, it was powerful. It could easily handle several homes if managed right. And then came the real idea, the one that made me smile like a villain in my own movie. If the HOA ever tried this stunt again, cutting off someone's utilities, pushing fines, using power, I could turn the tables. I wouldn't just be another resident. I'd become the source. Still, I had to stay patient. I couldn't reveal anything yet. Karen was too suspicious, and the HOA board would pounce on any reason to inspect my property. Over the next week, I played my part perfectly. I acted frustrated, complained about having no water, and even pretended to carry bottled jugs from the store. Whenever the HOA patrol passed, I made sure to look desperate, shaking my head, making them think they'd broken me. Inside my house, though, everything was running perfectly. I even started collecting the extra water in big plastic barrels I hid under a tarp behind my fence. Then something strange started happening around the neighborhood. People began talking. "Hey, Ethan, have you noticed the pressure's been lower lately? My sprinklers keep sputtering." I nodded sympathetically, hiding a grin. The HOA's system was starting to weaken, probably due to years of lazy maintenance and greedy budget cuts. And Karen, as usual, was blaming everyone but herself. A few days later, I overheard her arguing with another board member outside the mailboxes. "I told you to increase the maintenance fees." "Karen, people are already complaining. Then find them for something else." "I don't care." It was chaos, and I loved every second. That night, I stood over the old well again, listening to the hum of the pump beneath my feet. The sound felt like a heartbeat, strong, patient, unstoppable. And I realized this wasn't just about water anymore. It was about control. For years, the HOA controlled everyone. When to mow, what color to paint, how to live. But now, I had something they didn't. Something essential. The idea kept growing in my head until I finally said it out loud. If they want control, I'll give them a taste of real dependency. I called Lucas again and asked, hypothetically, how hard would it be to set up an extra tap outside my fence? Something neighbors could use, say, for emergencies? He laughed, realizing what I was planning. "You're not just trying to survive, are you? You're planning to take over." I smiled. "Let's just say, when the HOA's water finally runs dry, I'll be the one selling the rain." As the night grew quiet and the air filled with the distant hum of sprinklers, I knew this was just the beginning. The HOA thought they'd broken me by shutting off my water. But in truth, they just unlocked the deepest, most dangerous weapon buried beneath their perfect little community. And soon, every drop would belong to me. It started with whispers. At first, just a few neighbors mentioned it casually: weak shower pressure, sprinklers sputtering, dishwasher stopping mid-cycle. But within days, those whispers turned into angry conversations across driveways. Something was wrong with the HOA's water system. I heard them while sitting on my porch, pretending to sip from an empty glass. "My grass is dying. We pay them every month for this." Karen said they're working on it, but that was 3 days ago. I stayed quiet, hiding a smirk behind my cup. For once, it wasn't me they were blaming. It was her. Karen Bishop, the self-proclaimed queen of Maple Ridge, was finally losing her crown. On the 4th day, The HOA sent out an urgent notice through email. Due to unforeseen maintenance, water pressure may be temporarily reduced. Please limit usage and remain patient as we address the issue. Typical HOA language. Fancy words for we messed up and don't know how to fix it. But I knew exactly what was happening. Their outdated underground line system was cracked and leaking. It hadn't been maintained properly in years because Karen had been rerouting the maintenance funds to community upgrades, new flower beds, fancy gate lights, and pointless statues. And now, it was falling apart. Meanwhile, my water was flowing stronger than ever. Every faucet, every shower, every drop, pure, steady, and completely outside their control. I'd wake up each morning to see neighbors filling buckets and carrying them home from who knows where. The HOA tried to bring in repairmen, but that only made things worse. The moment they started digging, they hit another broken pipe. By the end of the week, half the neighborhood had no running water at all. That's when I decided to make my move. Late Friday evening, I took one of my extra barrels, filled it up from my well, and rolled it to the front of my house. Then, using a thick marker, I wrote a single line on a board. Fresh, clean water, $10 per fill. I placed it by the driveway under my porch light. Within an hour, people started showing up. At first just one or two, curious, desperate, then more. Families carrying buckets, old men with jugs, kids holding garden hoses like snakes. They looked tired, thirsty, frustrated. "Ethan, is this for real?" one neighbor asked. "Sure," I said. "Pure groundwater. No HOA strings attached." They handed me cash. I filled their containers. And just like that, the well became the heart of the neighborhood. But of course, Karen noticed. I was helping Mrs. Daniels fill her buckets when I heard the familiar sound of heels clicking on pavement. There she was, Karen Bishop, in her perfectly pressed suit, clutching her clipboard like a weapon. "Mr. Cole," she barked, marching toward me. "What do you think you're doing?" I didn't even flinch. "Selling water." Seems like the HOA supply ran dry. Her face turned red. "This is a violation of Community Commerce Code. You can't sell anything from your property without board approval." I smiled politely and reached into my back pocket, pulled out a neatly folded sheet, a copy of the state's water rights law. "Actually," I said calmly, "private wells are exempt from HOA regulation. Section 42, line 8. You can double-check." She snatched the paper, skimmed it, and her expression shifted from anger to confusion, then to panic. She knew it was true. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, "and I will, because unlike your pipes, mine actually work." The people in line started laughing. One of them even clapped. Karen's eyes darted from me to the growing crowd, all of them paying me for something she was supposed to provide. Her little empire was crumbling right in front of her, and there wasn't a thing she could do about it. She turned sharply, muttering under her breath, "This isn't over," and she stormed off, her heels clicking faster than before. I watched her go, feeling that familiar rush of satisfaction. No yelling, no threats, just calm, simple revenge through action. By nightfall, my driveway looked like a marketplace. I kept refilling barrels, counting bills, and writing names on a list, customers who'd all lost faith in the HOA. It was poetic justice. The same people they tried to control were now turning to me, the man they once fined for a non-compliant mailbox color. I went inside, washed my hands with my own water, and looked at myself in the mirror. This wasn't just payback anymore. It was transformation. The HOA wanted to break me. Instead, they just built me into their biggest rival. And deep down, I knew the real war hadn't even started yet. Because when the HOA's pride finally ran dry, I'd be the one selling it back to them, one drop at a time. By the next morning, my driveway looked like a mini water station. Plastic barrels, jugs, coolers, all lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. What started as a few desperate neighbors had turned into a movement. People were talking. People were choosing me over the HOA. And the best part? Every single drop of water they filled came from beneath my land the HOA once tried to control. By noon, word had spread across the neighborhood group chat. "Ethan Cole's got clean water. He's helping everyone out. Don't bother waiting on Karen. Go to Ethan's." That afternoon, I counted at least 40 people who stopped by. Some offered money, others offered food or favors. One woman, Mrs. Taylor, teared up while filling her containers. "You have no idea what this means for us," she said softly. "My husband's on medication. We couldn't even run his humidifier last night." I smiled. "Don't worry, Mrs. Taylor. You'll always have water here." For the first time in weeks, I felt proud, not just for outsmarting the HOA, but for helping people they had ignored. But of course, it didn't take long for Karen to come storming back. Around 4 p.m., as I refilled a family's jugs, I saw her white SUV roll up. She slammed the door, clipboard in hand, sunglasses reflecting the crowd gathered on my lawn. "Mr. Cole," she shouted, "you're causing chaos. The HOA board will not tolerate this behavior." The people in line went silent. All eyes were on me. I wiped my hands, turned slowly, and faced her. "Chaos? Karen, people just want water. Something you promised to provide." "It's not that simple," she snapped. "The mainline repairs are taking longer than expected." "Oh, really?" I said. "Maybe if you hadn't spent the repair funds on those fake marble statues by the gate, this wouldn't be happening." The crowd chuckled, soft at first, then louder. Her face went red. "You're violating HOA rules by selling unregulated water." I reached into my pocket and calmly unfolded the same paper as before, the state water rights law. I read out loud this time, so everyone could hear. Private well owners are independent from HOA jurisdiction. Their water cannot be regulated, fined, or restricted. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone clapped again. Another neighbor yelled, "He's right, Karen. Leave him alone." Karen's eyes darted around, realizing she was outnumbered. She tried to regain control, her voice trembling but sharp. "Fine. If you want to handle utilities yourself, Mr. Cole, don't expect the HOA to protect your property rights when the board votes on next month's assessments." I smiled. "Oh, I'm counting on that." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I leaned closer. "It means I've kept records. Every gallon sold, every dollar made, and every name of the residents who bought from me. You're not just fighting me, Karen, you're fighting your entire neighborhood now." She froze, her grip on the clipboard tightening. Behind her, one of the other board members, Mr. Dawson, muttered nervously, "Maybe we should talk about this later, Karen." But she didn't listen. She spun around, stomped back to her car, and peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching down the street. The moment she was gone, the silence broke, and everyone laughed, cheered, and clapped. Mrs. Daniels called out, "You showed her, Ethan. About time someone stood up to that woman." I laughed, trying to play it off, but inside, I felt something shift. The control Karen once had, the fear she ruled with, was gone. People no longer looked at her for leadership. They looked at me. That night, I sat in my backyard, watching the stars reflect off the water barrels lined up like trophies. Lucas came by, holding 2 beers. "Man, you've started a revolution," he said, sitting beside me. "Not a revolution," I replied. "Just a reminder, nobody owns what comes from the ground." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the faint hum of the pump. From somewhere down the street, we could hear the HOA's broken pipes hissing and sputtering, leaking away their last drops of authority. I turned to Lucas. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "They cut off my water thinking it'd break me. Instead, I'm selling it to their members and making more than my HOA dues ever cost." He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his beer. I grinned. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to surrender quietly. And as much as I was enjoying my victory, I could feel the storm brewing. Because people like her, they don't give up power. They come back for revenge. And when she did, I'd be ready. 2 days after Karen's meltdown, things in Maplewood Estates felt different. The neighborhood had changed. Where there used to be silence and fear, there was laughter, water, and the sound of barrels being filled at my place. Kids ran around with sprinklers again. Lawns looked alive. And for once, the HOA's rules didn't matter. But power, real power, never disappears quietly. It was around 7 a.m. when I heard the knock on my door. Not just a knock, a pound. 3 sharp hits that rattled the glass. When I opened it, there stood 2 uniformed officers. And right behind them, Karen, holding her infamous clipboard like a weapon. "Mr. Cole," one of the officers began, "we've received a complaint that you're running an unlicensed business from your property." I took a slow breath. "A business? No, officer. I'm just providing water to neighbors who've been cut off by the HOA." Karen smirked, her voice syrupy sweet. "He's charging for it, profiting from community resources. That's a direct violation of—" I cut her off. "Community resources? The HOA doesn't own my ground, Karen. That water comes from my private well. You should have done your research before calling the cops." One of the officers looked at me, then at her. "Ma'am, do you have proof this is HOA property?" Karen hesitated. Her lips tightened. "Well, no, but the HOA governs." The officer raised a hand. "Then this is a civil matter, not criminal. We're not getting involved." She turned red again, realizing her plan had failed, in front of the entire street because by now, half the neighborhood was watching from their porches. As the officers walked away, I gave her the calmest smile I could muster. "You keep digging holes for me, Karen, but I already hit water." The crowd laughed. She stormed off, her heels clacking against the pavement like gunfire. But that wasn't the end of it. The next week, the HOA went into full panic mode. They started sending out daily notices, threatening fines, legal actions, even suspension of community privileges. They shut down the neighborhood pool for maintenance. They stopped trash pickups, claiming budget shortages, all in a desperate attempt to punish me and anyone siding with me. It didn't work, because now almost everyone was with me. People began organizing through a group chat called Neighbors, Not Rules. We shared updates, supported each other, and planned to attend the next HOA board meeting together. When the day came, the meeting room at the clubhouse was packed. Dozens of residents stood shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed, faces serious. At the front table, Karen and her board looked smaller than ever. She cleared her throat nervously. "We've noticed unauthorized activities taking place in the community." A man in the back shouted, "You mean like cutting off our water?" Laughter erupted. Another woman added, "We're using our HOA fees for your fancy statues." Karen banged her gavel. "Order. I will have order." But it was too late. The room had turned against her. Lucas stood beside me and whispered, "They're dumb, man. You broke their spell." When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the front of the room. I placed a thick folder on the table, copies of water rights laws, my well inspection certificate, and screenshots of the HOA's financial mismanagement that Lucas had uncovered. The room fell silent. "Karen," I said evenly, "you accuse me of breaking rules, but you broke trust. And in this neighborhood, that's worse." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The treasurer, Mr. Dawson, lowered his eyes in shame. "I told her this would backfire," he muttered under his breath. I turned to face everyone. If the HOA won't serve the residents, then maybe it's time the residents serve themselves. The crowd cheered. For a moment, even I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Applause echoing in the same hall where, months ago, I was publicly shamed for leaving my trash bin out one extra day. Karen tried one last move. "You think you can run this community, Ethan? You have no idea what you're up against." I smiled. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm up against. Because you're scared, not of me, but of losing control." She glared, breathing heavily, realizing she had lost the room. That night, the residents voted to suspend the current HOA board pending investigation. Karen walked out before the results were even read. But before leaving, she turned to me with one final whisper. "You may have won this round, Ethan, but you still don't know the truth about that well." And just like that, the suspense returned. Because deep down I felt it too. Something about that well, something didn't add up. After the vote that night, everything seemed perfect. Karen was gone. The HOA board was suspended, and I was finally free. But her last words wouldn't leave my mind. "You still don't know the truth about that well." I replayed it again and again. What did she mean? For days, I tried to ignore it, busy helping neighbors, maintaining the pump, and enjoying the sudden peace that filled Maplewood Estates. But deep down, a shadow of curiosity had taken root. Then, one morning, as I was checking the water levels, I noticed something strange. The pressure gauge, which had always stayed steady, was flickering wildly. The readings dropped, then spiked again like the water flow was fighting back. I opened the access panel, shining my flashlight inside. The metal walls were damp, but not from groundwater. There was something else, a faint shimmer, almost oily, running through the stream. Lucas was the first to notice me staring. "You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed him the gauge report. "Does this look normal to you?" He frowned. "No way. This isn't mineral fluctuation. This looks like contamination." My stomach dropped. Could Karen have been telling the truth? That evening, I decided to find out for myself. I collected a small sample from the well and sent it anonymously to a nearby environmental lab. I didn't mention the HOA or the situation, just asked for a full composition report. 3 days later, I got the results, and my heart nearly stopped. The letter read, "Sample contains traces of industrial solvents and hydrocarbons. Suggests chemical seepage, likely from old underground storage." I sat there frozen, the paper trembling in my hand. Old underground storage? There were no factories nearby, no refineries. Unless I pulled out an old property map I'd saved from the HOA archives back when I first bought the house. And there it was, a faint dotted line marked utility easement, 1962. It ran directly under my property and right beneath the HOA's main clubhouse. I rushed to the garage, grabbed a shovel, and started digging near the side of the well. Not deep, just enough to see if there was anything unusual. After about an hour, my shovel hit something solid. Clank! I brushed away the dirt, revealing rusted metal, a sealed drum, half buried in the soil. I knelt closer, heart pounding. On the side of the barrel were faded, stenciled words. "Property of Maplewood Development Corp., 1961. Lucas, who had come running after hearing the noise, stared at it. "What the hell is that?" I shook my head. "Whatever it is, it's been under here for 60 years. We pried it open carefully, using a crowbar. Inside were thick black sludge and corroded metal parts, like remnants of old machinery or chemicals. The smell was enough to make our eyes water." Lucas gagged. "Man, this is toxic waste. They must have buried this when the original neighborhood was built." I realized it instantly. The HOA, or rather, the developers before them, had covered up an illegal dump site. And when they cut off my water, I accidentally tapped into that buried system. That's why Karen was so desperate to stop me. She didn't care about rules. She was covering up a crime that could destroy the entire community. I grabbed my phone and recorded everything. The barrel, the sludge, the coordinates, the date. If she thought I wouldn't find the truth, I muttered, she underestimated me. But before I could even upload the footage, my phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. It said, "Stop digging, Ethan. You don't know what you're dealing with." No name. No number. Just that one message. Lucas looked at me, pale. "Who sent that?" I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. Because only one person had ever used that tone with me. Karen. But she was gone, wasn't she? That night, as I stood by the well, the wind howled through the trees. The moonlight shimmered off the surface of the water, or whatever it had become. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Fear. Because Karen's warning wasn't just about the water. It was about what was beneath it. And deep inside, I knew the real story of Maplewood Estates was only just beginning to surface. The next morning, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that rusted barrel, the black sludge, the faint chemical smell, and Karen's warning. "You still don't know the truth about that well." Now I did. But the truth was worse than I'd ever imagined. I spent the whole day gathering proof, photos, videos, the lab report, everything. Lucas helped me piece it together, cross-referencing the original property records. By noon, it was all clear. The entire neighborhood of Maplewood Estates was built on an old industrial waste site. Decades ago, the developers buried hundreds of barrels filled with chemicals and sealed them under layers of dirt before selling the land as eco-friendly suburban property. And the HOA, led by people like Karen, had known about it for years. They weren't protecting the community. They were protecting themselves. That's why they shut off my water. Because when I dug that well, I unknowingly tapped straight into their buried secret. Lucas slammed his hand on the table. We have to take this public. Now, I nodded, my heart racing. We drafted an email with all the evidence attached and sent it to every local news outlet in the city. Within hours, it blew up. News vans started lining the streets. Reporters stood outside my home, microphones in hand, while drones flew overhead, capturing footage of the uncovered barrels. Neighbors gathered in shock as headlines flashed across their phones. Toxic waste found beneath Maplewood Estates. HOA under investigation. Karen tried to deny everything at first, claiming it was fake news and an old misunderstanding. But when the Environmental Protection Agency showed up with excavation crews, her story crumbled. They unearthed over 40 rusted barrels from beneath the clubhouse and surrounding lots, each one leaking the same black sludge. As the officers led Karen away in handcuffs for obstruction and environmental negligence, she turned to me one last time. Her face pale, voice shaking, but still defiant. "You think you won, Ethan, but you have no idea what you just released." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer, just smiled. That eerie, knowing smile. The next day, half the neighborhood was evacuated for testing. Government trucks rolled in, sealing off the well area with yellow hazard tape. I stood at the edge of my yard, watching the place where everything started, where I dug for freedom and found poison. Lucas came over quietly. "Man, this is huge. You exposed them all." I nodded slowly. "But if Karen's right, this isn't over." He looked confused. "You think there's more?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the messages I'd received since the news broke. Most were from reporters or grateful neighbors. But one caught my eye, another message from that same unknown number. It said, "You stopped Karen, but she wasn't the only one guarding the secret. Check your basement." My stomach twisted. I ran inside, heart pounding, and grabbed a flashlight. The basement was quiet, dusty. I stepped down carefully, scanning the corners until my light caught something. A faint wet patch on the floor near the old drain. I knelt down. The water was bubbling, slowly, and then I saw it. Tiny black streaks rising from below. The same oily shimmer from the well. My hand trembled. "Lucas, it's spreading." He froze. "You mean?" I nodded. "The contamination isn't outside. It's under every house." The camera on my mind zoomed out, over the houses, the roads, the lawns that once looked perfect, and beneath them, a dark network of buried poison waking up after decades of silence. I looked straight into the lens of the world, heart pounding. They cut off my water to hide the truth. But the truth is about to flood everything. Screen fades to black. Suspenseful music builds. Then one final message appears on screen. Coming soon, The Wells of Maplewood. If you love watching stories where truth fights back against power, make sure to subscribe to Zarela HOA Stories and hit that like button so you don't miss the next part. And don't forget to drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see where our truth seekers are watching from.